Over to you, Lizzie.
Oh, thank you so much, Nick, for your kind introduction and for this invitation too. It's so lovely to support your event. Thinking so much of people in Ukraine and people who are having to be away from their families. I visited Ukraine 3 times before 2014, and we absolutely loved it. It was such a vibrant place. So thinking of the spirit there, and yeah, very much thinking of everyone. And love hearing about how origami is celebrating the normal, and actually we refuse to give in to all of that disruption. And actually, although it's a completely different situation, I offer origami in the situation of people who are very unwell and maybe in hospital. It does represent that disruption and your life being out of control, and actually offering that time together to fold something beautiful brings that calm and focus that we all deeply need. So I'm hoping I can give you a little flavor of what I do, discovering origami, folding in hospitals. And actually what we're going to fold, you may well feel, oh, I've done that many times, folded a traditional lily. But this is where I started, and I'll explain a little bit later on. And I hope that you can, maybe you already have that sense, but each time I fold, it feels like it's starting all over again. You're starting with a fresh sheet of paper. It's a new start, a new beginning, and I feel every time I discover something from that. And I think also the feeling that it's traditional, that's been passed on from one to another, is very special. So yes, my title, Dr. Lizzie Burns. I'm originally a scientist, and for the last 15 years I've been working as a creative specialist in a hospital in London, University College Hospital, which I absolutely love. Just 1 day a week, but it's always so special and so precious. I also work with Origami Pulse, and all of the origami has really come from a patient asking me to learn. I'll explain a little bit more. But I just wanted to show you these pictures on this first page, because can't you see those big smiles, even though obviously we're all wearing masks? And whilst you know, for many of us, it feels like we're moving on from the pandemic in hospital, we're still having to be that careful. We're still in that place, actually. People are so vulnerable. Um, so just to give you a tiny bit of my background, some of you may have seen me before, but just to explain, I'm a scientist in background. And actually, I am an artist, but I work in a completely different way. Most of my work is not origami. And I love to paint, I love to write, I write poems, I've written a play, I do paintings, I do sculptures, drawings, photographs, little films, many, many things. Most of all, I love encouraging others to get creative. In this case, expressing how astonishing our body is. And you can see it's behind me as well, the painting, a large collection of paintings based on research funded by the Medical Research Council. So finding ways to explain to people how incredible our bodies are, how research is trying to help, how medicine helps, and inspiring people to get creative at the same time. Again, maybe things that are a little bit shocking, a bit unattractive, something like blood, actually showing the beauty in that, and that can bring comfort. So all of that work I used to, well, I still work as a science-based artist and communicator. And I love, as Nick was saying, love working with schools. And actually, I still do a lot of outreach projects with schools, often about science. I've been doing a project about vaccines at the moment. And you can see there's some primary school children. They've been looking at blood cells themselves and doing their own artwork. And you can just see the enthusiasm. Now on the right there, you can see pictures of adults, and you can even see, this is from a few years ago. Can you see what they're painting? It looks like a coronavirus. And I just love the expression on their faces, because actually adults are the hardest of all. Children will always be creative and they'll always get excited, and it's much harder to get adults excited. And just these comments have just inspired me so much. I have books and books of lovely comments, very inspirational. I'd like to do more of this. Thanks for the rare opportunity as an adult to play. I'd completely forgotten how much I enjoyed messing around with paint. I never thought of myself as a creative person. I found the concept that creativity can be developed enlightening, and that has given me a sense of freedom. So I found adults actually really interesting because they're harder. So it was a good challenge. And just seeing the joy on people's faces, that really is why I do what I do. Um, all of that led me to work with patients in hospital in UCLH in London hospital there. And it's been 15 years now. I absolutely love it. As I said, each time I'm there is a special day. I never know who I'm going to meet, what's going to happen, but amazing things do happen. Often it's catching people at the right moment. So I work as I call myself a creative specialist, and it's really a way of encouraging, supporting time for staff and patient well-being. The chance to get focused on something completely different, away from their work, away from their illness, and just remember what excites them in life. And actually learning is just such an important thing for us, providing us mental stimulation, connection, a feeling of discovery again, that life can be exciting and that there's more than illness or stress with work. So these are just some of the comments. You can see the lovely smiles too. You can see the flowers that we're going to make too. And I think those smiles communicate more than anything else. I started off originally encouraging painting and drawing, which I think is a fantastic thing to do. And if someone gives it the chance, wonderful things happen. But you know what? I think most people have felt so judged by their art teachers and feel really lacking confidence. It's very hard to get people to do that. But origami is just so accessible. It brings back fond memories of being at school, messing around with your mates, having a bit of a laugh. And I think the two ways almost that I've found to encourage people to be creative is origami, because it has happy associations from childhood partly, and also doodling as well. These are things we did when we were a bit bored at school, as Nick was talking about boredom. Absolutely. And origami is definitely a good way of combating that. But it's full of meaning and purpose and connection, which is all the opposite from boredom. So something to do instead of just sitting, I put a smile on my face, and you can see that, can't you? Kept me not thinking about radiotherapy as I'm anxious into hospitals. Encouraged, connected, and more humanized than medicalized. Time passed so quickly. I'm only going to show you a few slides, but I thought it was important to show you the context. And also I've run over 3,000 sessions, most of which have been origami. So it was really the first 4 or 5 years I was offering other things, and then origami has absolutely flourished and become the main thing that people want to do. And it means I reach a lot more people as well. So this is feedback from over 500 people, patients. Was it helpful? Pretty much everyone, 99% of people said, yes, it was. And how? And I've just loosely categorized the answers, most of all mental stimulation. And actually hospitals are places where there's very little mental stimulation. If you're a child, you'd be in a colourful ward, there'd be things to do, things to play with. As an adult, there is nothing really, only reminders of being ill, and everyone talks to you about illness. So I think that there is a vital need for mental stimulation, and that if you're feeling happier in yourself, it will impact in so many positive ways. Feeling connected to others helps lift mood. You can see that. How did it make you feel? The majority of answers is happy. You can see that, can't you? Also relaxed and a feeling of achievement. Do you want this to continue? Everybody said yes. I've also been working with staff, and increasingly that's where I've been focusing. Since the pandemic, I was asked to go remote, and working actually through YouTube, as well as sessions through Teams and Zoom. And staff really are big focus. They are going through such difficult times. Getting time for well-being is the challenge. I increasingly work by welcoming people, but this is again some answers from, this was actually before the pandemic, so in person. Was this helpful? Everyone said yes. In what way it helped to relax? Takes your mind off work, lowers stress. How did it make you feel? Relaxed and happy. How are you feeling before? About a third of people saying they felt stressed. Should it continue? Yes. Lessens the stress we're feeling in the wards, and felt calmer. I was feeling upset and fearful. I've now been making sort of boxes, origami relaxation boxes, leaving in staff rooms. I'm not sure how much they're used. I don't think they get the chance. But anyway, it's still showing and expressing care, and I think that's important. And again, I think it's the expressions that show everything. So the bottom right corner there, you can see nurses was actually teaming up with an amazing group in Japan, and they sent us over some beautiful cranes with lovely messages. And people were so touched and so thrilled that people across the world thought of them. On the bottom left corner, welcoming new nurses, international nurses, and giving them a feeling of community and connection. Felt lighter, felt happy and calm. And welcoming, here it is, a new nurse joining our ward. And she suggests it's very helpful, it's very therapeutic, calming and de-stressing. I love everything about this, so relaxing. I want more of this. So one question that I've had, I don't know whether you've had this one, but I was a little bit reluctant with something like origami because I questioned actually the creativity of it, because in many ways obviously it's creative if you have designed and discovered something yourself, but what about for someone else? They're kind of following your instructions. Is it creative? So that's something I have questioned, and I found a really interesting book, The Dynamics of Creation, Anthony Storr, and in it was, I thought, the perfect explanation to the question I was seeking. Creativity, the ability to bring something into existence, so is to create something. Origami clearly is doing that, but it does not need to be new to anyone else except the person who creates it. And I think that's really important. And remembering that discovery of origami, when somebody's making it, it's their first time, it's incredibly precious. It is their discovery, and that's what I think where the joy and the achievement comes from. And that's something I really keep hold of, and in a way why I'm interested, because I've folded a crane so many times, but it's not that I'm interested in. It's the discovery for somebody else and the magic that brings and the feelings it brings. So origami, this is something you may have seen me share before, but I still think it contains a lot. What does origami bring? It brings time together. I think that's important. So it has, out of everything I've offered, it has the widest appeal. And just walking around with some origami flowers in the ward, it just brings interest. It's full of beauty, a feeling of wonder. It's very orderly, and I think we feel stress when things are out of our control. So illness particularly disrupts. It's as a patient recently said, it's an ugly time, and actually origami is all about beauty, perfection. Obviously there is no such thing as perfection, and also recognizing that you cannot produce perfect, but there's an element of it that's very beautiful and very structured. It encourages a lot of self-discipline as well. So I think that is very good, the focus of it, giving people time when they forget everything else. The mind doesn't wander, you're just stuck with the paper and yourself. You're also using, I think, the simplest of materials of paper. It's incredibly cheap, as Nick said. Any paper will do. And there's something very resourceful about that. Something very simple. You can create amazing things, complicated things, or simple things from something that's everyday. You transform it. And I think that gives messages of resilience. You can do a lot with very little. So it depends on the person whether they like, as Nick was saying, can start off simple, become complex, maybe enjoy simple again. It all has value and beauty, and in a way there isn't a right or wrong there. It involves a lot of learning, and I think that's a really good thing. I think we love to learn throughout our lives. It will give us a sense of achievement, of discovery, of interaction. It's very spatial, which I think is quite a tricky thing, full of challenge, feeling of discovery. You have to encourage persistence, not to give up, be very kind on yourself. And I think when you're kind on yourself, that's about self-care as well. Origami only exists because of connection. If people hadn't discovered something, they wouldn't have been able to then pass that on. So it's about sharing and interaction, which I think is different from other art forms where people create for themselves. They might show it, but it's not about teaching. Oh, I think I've got a bit of feedback from someone there. I wonder if I could, or if somebody could silence that. Yeah, thank you. And that this is something I always find, origami really lifts mood. I don't know if you find that, but it always lifts my mood. If you're feeling a bit down, a bit lost, reach for that paper. The feeling of achievement, very self-motivating. People get into whatever it is. They might love abstract shapes, they might like animals, but it's also full of gifts as well. You make one for yourself and then you start making for others, and other people have shared the gift of time and care to encourage you, and so you pass it on. It requires time, and that's important. I think we've all got used to just flicking away on our screens, not concentrating on anything. It requires time and patience, and that's a wonderful thing to nurture. You're encouraging as well, I think, respect for the everyday, for that paper. I think of it like a person. It's potentially fragile. If you treated it without respect, it could tear, which is the worst noise, isn't it? If it tears, and you're not meaning to. So treat it kindly with respect and understanding. And I think that gentleness is about encouraging that gentleness in ourselves and maybe to others. Full of meaning. Of course, this is not a flower, but we all see what it is and what it represents as well, which is care. So like all art forms, it's not what it really is, it's what it symbolizes. And this everyday transformation of the everyday is a wonderful thing. So this was actually a photograph just with nurses just before the pandemic. I think this was the very end of February or start of March, and we were all wondering what was coming towards us. We all folded lilies and lotuses in a moment of celebrating, hoping for calm. As mentioned, I've been recording a fold every week. So my hospital asked me to go remote, and they suggested that YouTube would be the most accessible for both staff and patients. So I've shared a fold each week, now every fortnight, because I'm in the wards every other week. So if if that's potentially useful resource, a lot of it's traditional. It's really about time together and time for well-being. And if possible, folds that feel right for the time, but it's just about the time and care together. So I'm going to share with you this lily, and because this is actually where I started, which is very much, which came from a lady who was who'd been unwell as a child in hospital, and she had grown up in Hong Kong, and that's where she learned to do origami. And she learned to make these lilies, and she'd make bunches of flowers. She was unwell again as an adult. She'd make bunches of flowers to give to others. So she'd make them as gifts to the healthcare workers and to a family to say thank you for your care. So she found it a very positive, focused activity. And I think, in this case, it is lovely what it looks like. So this is the bunch that she had taught me to make bunches of flowers. And I didn't even know there was an origami community. I learned directly from her and that culture where you'd maybe make bunches and gifts. She would also wrap it up in tissue paper and maybe spray them with perfume. And I think they're beautiful things. And actually, this is something I found has really motivated others. So I'd walk around with a little bunch of flowers. We've also made bunches for our reception within the hospital. Wherever I've done workshops, ended up leaving flowers. And they've often lasted for a long time as well, which is lovely. One of the most common comments from people is, of course, that it's wonderful because these are flowers that don't die. And actually, a lot of people don't like seeing that flowers die. So I guess there's many metaphors there. So, right, sorry, I've talked so much. The aim here is to fold, because that is what we're going to enjoy. As I said, you may feel familiar with this, and in some ways that's great. Think of it as a friend you're going to rediscover. So I've got a little board to press on. I would normally explain, but I'm assuming that you have your squares already. But if I was to explain it, I would suggest that I'd get my A4 piece of paper and I would turn it round, fold it in half, and actually I use a strong tear, and then I can tear it. Does anybody want me to show you how to make a square, or shall I just assume you've got the square? Speak up or forever hold your peace.
Let's just assume, Lizzie.
Let's assume. Thank you. I just wanted to check. Right. So hopefully you've got a coloured piece of paper. I'm not using coloured because it changes the colours on my camera a bit. So I'm going to take you through this little journey. This is traditional lily, but it's a wonderful thing to make. So I'm just going to fold it over in half. So make a nice diagonal line. And so the way I teach it, it is not at all technical, because everybody I work with pretty much does not do origami normally. So on my 3 rules for origami, my first rule is start well, it will continue well. Start badly, it will get worse. And that's something people don't necessarily realize, that care and attention. And actually just saying about actually how we enjoy getting things right, take your time, line things up. That's the first rule. Start well, continues well. Second rule I tend to give is to give a good strong fold, because actually that usually makes things work well. Otherwise it unravels. I know there's different styles of origami, but I also say about how it's very good for letting out your tension and stress. People, when they're first starting, tend to be a little bit cautious. So actually encouraging them to be a little bit bolder by adding that fold I think is a good thing. My third rule, and this is for adults really, is to remember it's meant to be fun, not to take it too seriously. Adults need that reminder. And actually I'll say, maybe if you find it's doing something else, then maybe actually you're an inventor, and actually that can be a wonderful thing. So just really encouraging people to be playful. And I think all of this is about learning and being able to learn new things, particularly with illnesses. Everything's changing. So the more that somebody can change in a playful, positive way, the better. So all we've done so far is make a diagonal fold, and I'm encouraging you to then open it up. I suppose I'm twisting it around a little bit, and we'll do the other diagonal fold. Now, I slightly changed how I've done things to explain on camera, actually. And as you can see, I'm not doing it the usual way. Most people have a filming overhead. I explain this as a little bit. You're joining me in my sitting room, and at times I'll also fold into the camera. Right, so I'm going to open this up, and then my next instruction would be to take it and then turn it over. And that's really crucial, that direction. And it looks like a little tent. And I just encourage people to enjoy every little shape that we go along. I mean, isn't that a beautiful thing in itself? So next, to fold it in half, to make a rectangle. So I tend not to use, as I said, any of the technical terms, because that's not the group I'm working with. And in some ways, I don't want to learn those terms in case I start using them. So opening it up again. And then I tend to twizzle it around a little bit. I've kept it open, and I'm going to do the other horizontal or vertical piece. So yeah, this is obviously not the simplest one. Something I'd usually start with is something like the traditional heart, which is a really good one. And I usually keep it as a surprise as to what we're going to do. So this piece of paper now, hopefully in your hands, it's already kind of curling up. Feels like it's wanting to become a flower already. So hopefully it's curling up a little bit. Lovely. So anybody wants me to pause or do anything? I know loads of you will be familiar with this, but some of you, this will be completely new, and I want it to feel new for all of us, actually, this feeling of discovery. So I'm going to take all the corners and push them together. And this often reminds people, I think of it as like a little flower as well. It's a little bit like the fortune teller, that it reminds people of that, those nice happy memories. So now just squash it down. That's it. So it's nice and flat, and encourage people to just check that it looks like this as it looks down, because people can start to want to fold over, so it superficially looks the same, but it's not. There we go. So this is really just how I would normally explain it to anyone. So at the moment, it's like a little book. So it's gathered at the bottom, open at the top, maybe like a flower. And if you just pick up a page, you can just turn the page until it sticks out. And then if you pop your finger into this and then squash it down. And so, in the hospital, when we're doing something like this, it's really a good old chance to chat and encourage and connect, squashing at the sides. So it's less about the sort of what we're doing, but more about those wider conversations. It's that happy time together. And there's nothing like doing something together to really encourage that conversation. So it looks a bit like a kite now. Right. Now, if you take your piece and then turn it over to the back, and again, lift up one of these sheets. And again, pop your finger in. I encourage people to put their finger all the way down to the bottom, because it's getting rid of those wrinkles. That's right, get rid of those wrinkles, because again, it will disrupt everything. And keeping everything lined up. There we go, and a squash down the sides. There we go. Lovely. And again, think of this as a little book. So we're going to just turn the page and turn the page again till we get to another of these little leaves sticking out like a page of your book. Again, pop your finger in. And again, squash it down. Also, the lady taught me to make these lilies. She would also potentially spray with perfume as well. You can spray these flowers with perfume. and they put in a vase. And I've done many different projects in my own hospital and here in Oxford, which is where I'm based. And it's been wonderful to hear friends who've ended up in hospital and they spotted these bunches of flowers. And incredible that people haven't taken them. People have been very respectful, which is quite surprising because obviously people can potentially take things. It's just lovely to hear. Here we go. We're going to leaf through again. We've just got one side, and maybe as you're turning the front, maybe at the back, you have to rotate as well. There we go. Just one last side here. There we go. And again, pop your finger in and squash it down. If I have time, I think we will have time. I want to read a tiny piece from a Japanese origami book that I've got as well, which I think could be quite relevant. There we go, squashing it down. Yeah, so it's all lined up. And I think that orderliness is very pleasing for people. Of course, it's very scientific as well. There is, as you all know, it's very much a science as well as an art. And I think there's something that's full of nature with this, which is wonderful. And that need, I think also when I've done this in schools, actually, teachers have said as well, this is quite good for those skills in science of following instructions and being very careful. Surprisingly, one of the hardest things is actually getting them to make a square of paper. They can really struggle with that. And it's felt as if my secondary school students can struggle with that more than primary school kids. Maybe it's the following instructions, but it's interesting, maybe losing those skills of doing something with your hands and measurements and being careful. It's a skill. Right, as it is now, so the sides where you've got a line there, just want you to take the top edge and fold it. So that one there, folding it and being nice and careful through the tip there, along that line. There we go. So I guess I've been learning to fold into a mirror in effect. Isn't it wonderful what the brain can do? These kind of things, certainly with the lily, because unusually, almost every patient I meet, and I've worked with thousands of people, almost everyone has happy childhood memories of origami. Believe it or not, I don't really, because I was always doing my own thing. And yeah, it's really interesting how it brings back these happy memories to people. Most people it does. There we go. And take the other side and fold that. And of course, paper aeroplanes, something like this. And it really appeals, I think, both equally really to men and women as well, which is quite unusual actually, because I think often these things can get pigeonholed. Something like knitting, for example, would be seen very much as female, although apparently men used to knit lots in the Navy, which is a lovely idea of making pieces for loved ones at home. There we go. It's done on one side, turn to the back. And again, just make sure it's that line there. Don't know how lined up that is, the joys of folding into a camera. I have to say, I can't do incredibly complex pieces this way because it gets very confusing. I tend to avoid saying left and right. Oops, just make sure you're doing one there. It'll be good enough though. There we go. And again, the outside layer. And sometimes patients have been wanting to learn as well. So probably don't remember, but on the slide where there was someone, Steve, who was holding up those lovely happy faces, and he was someone who went, I really want to learn to make the lily, and yeah, he managed to do that with making flowers to give to others. So I found this a particularly inspiring for people, and it's definitely a challenging one, but I think the challenge is also what gives people a sense of satisfaction. So I do recommend this is a really good one to consider sharing with others. Also had people get in touch saying they've managed to make flowers for loved ones in hospital, including someone whose mum then sadly passed away a few days later. And then she also made flowers to give to everybody at the funeral. So you just never know where this can go for people. And it's really touching to hear those stories. So really very deep for people. Okay, so turning these little pages till you get to another side with that horizontal line, same thing again. And encouraging that sort of precision with the tips. And it may be that have a go at folding and then you go in and, yeah, oh, shall I have a quick look? Let's swap over. And because actually, if it's not done that precisely, it can get a bit tricky later on. So I'm keen to make sure it works, but at the same time, it needs to be their own folding too. Right, how am I doing? I need to see what I'm doing a bit, really. So hopefully you've just got maybe one more side to go. Turn through your little pages. And again, I'm sort of turning through at the back. And same thing again from the top. And it needs to be on the side, which has got that horizontal line. And folding it along. Great. And then the top edge to that middle line. So at the time when I learned this, which was about 10 years ago, believe it or not, I didn't realise that there would be videos on YouTube. So I was attempting to try to make notes on how on earth to do it. It really hurt my head. I just remember having a few days of a really kind of splitting headache at times trying to remember this, because I felt this burden of responsibility. I've been asked to learn and pass it on, then I really have to. And it wasn't something I comfortably did. I think actually following instructions from others was a real challenge for me, because I kind of naturally want to do my own thing. But I think this can give a framework for people to start building confidence that they can create and do a lot more than they thought they could. Okay, so as it is now, this is how I'd encourage people to think of opening a present. It's just a nice thought. So I open a present, and then with the middle, I'm going to pull it down and roll in the top. And obviously this is a really tricky step. I describe it as being a bit mind-bending, and we're aiming for a point there. So often I've shown a few times. Sometimes people just instantly get it, to their astonishment, my astonishment, and sometimes it's just incredibly hard. So opening side, think of opening a present, taking the bottom and then pulling it forward, rolling in the top, which is the easiest bit, and then aiming towards a point like that. And then pushing it up. There we go. Squashing it down. And we'll do this obviously another 3 times. So turning to the back, lifting, opening that little gift, taking the middle, pulling it down, rolling in the sides. Oh, something amazing happened recently. I was quite astonished. I was in the centre of Oxford, which is where I live, and a lady bounded up to me with her daughter and said, "Are you Lizzie Burns?" Yes. How do we know each other? And it turned out that her husband works in the John Radcliffe, the hospital here, had picked up one of our origami inspiration leaflets. So we got 25,000 of them printed, sent to hospitals across the UK. And he had brought this home to his family. And they'd been using it as a family. And the daughter who was there was 11. And she amazingly had started then wanting to learn how to fold a crane, because of course Japanese culture is just so loved, particularly the younger generation with anime. So she wanted to learn the crane, and she was teaching, and she said her mum said she taught how to do this from you, because she couldn't do it before, and how to go very slowly. She taught her grandmother in Brazil over Zoom, and showed a photograph of the grandmother holding up this crane. She'd never done anything like this. She was 72. I mean, what an astonishing thing to hear. So she had no idea I was in Oxford. It was just chance, but she recognised me from the YouTube video. It's the only time that's happened, but that was quite a moment. There we go. Right, turn through your pages till you get to another side. Open those flaps, thinking of a little gift. And then again, pulling it down, shaping it in. We are getting there. That's right, making a little point, pushing it up, mind bending this. And I guess this is what makes it a fairly complex one, isn't it? It's a surprising one for me to started with and to share with patients too, turning through. But you know what? I encourage a bit of ambition. And if you've done this together with somebody else, it's going to give you some confidence you can do something. Again, opening those flaps, pulling the middle down, rolling in the sides, making that nice little sharp point, and then pushing it up. There we go. So it's really coming together. I hope it's coming together for everybody here. Right. So I'm assuming all is well. Do shout if not. Next, I'm going to turn to a fresh page, nice fresh side there. And make sure, of course, that we're holding it from the bottom, which is where it's gathered. I turned a page to the smooth side, and we're just going to take that lower edge and fold it to the middle line. And this is really tightening up the flower. After this, we've made it. So I'd explain you've done all of that work. After this, it's like a little flat pack flower. Again, this lower edge. So I've sort of, obviously I've been taught by a patient and I've learnt as I've gone along. I really didn't know about the kind of origami world of these groups like and British Origami Society. It was someone called Angela who got in touch with me and said, oh, you're doing other things as well. You're also teaching origami. Do you know there's this community, there's the British Origami Society. So I really wouldn't have realized otherwise. I was really just using YouTube videos. And I have to say, I still really enjoy that as a way of learning. And that's probably how most people do. But it's so lovely to be part of this wider community. And that you're all being so innovative and coming up with new pieces. Turn to the back. Again, turn a new leaf till we get to a smooth side. Again, the bottom edge. And folding to the middle. And I learned so much from patients, as Nick was saying, learning from young people. For me, with patients, like there was a lady I was working with on Wednesday, and she said how becoming a patient, you just lose everything of who you are and how important just seeing a little bit of art is to remember, to encourage you and to remember there is life beyond being unwell and treatment. It's holding on to the human spirit. And I think origami is incredibly accessible, full of mental stimulation, which is vitally needed. I think keep you focused not just on illness, which is worrying, but instead on what you can do with very little. Perfect for being in bed. Turn over a page. Again, turn to that fresh side, bottom edge. That's it. Fold to the middle line. Okay, it's probably quite thick by now. And occasionally people try to bring along card when we do something online. Don't use card. That's like heavy weights for your fingers. That's going to be too tough. Again, keep leafing through until you get to that final page. Hopefully you've got a tidy little stack, all these layers, trying to encourage people to keep things flat as they go along, because otherwise it gets confusing. Again, this bottom edge to the middle line. There we go. And last side. So I hope you managed to all do that. You all look nice and busy. Nick's cat looks busy too. Oh, there we go. So hopefully you got this tidy little bunch of petals, and I say this is a flat pack flower. Believe it or not, it's going to open up. Now, the really interesting thing is everyone wants to hold the bottom of a flower because that's how we hold flowers, but you have to unlearn it. So I say we're just going to hold the petals, just the petals. It goes against all your instincts, but we're going to take the top petal. So grab yourself, if you've got a pencil or a pen. So this is how I was taught. I know you can do it as a flat way, which is is a different way of doing it. But I think this curviness is how I was taught, and I think looks quite natural. So I'm going to take the front of the petal, and I'm just going to wind it around the pencil down to the point where it naturally goes. Don't go any further. There we go. One petal. And then on to the next. Now at this point, don't hold the bottom of it because it's obviously like a little box that needs to open up. So going with each of these petals, again, rolling around the pencil. And I just encourage people, have you been able to think about anything else? No. Well, that's great, isn't it? We all need times when we forget. Talk about a holiday for the mind. When you're creating, everything else disappears. And just the joy and the beauty. It is very mindful. It's bringing you into the moment, appreciating the feeling of the paper as well, the textures, the feeling of the respect you're giving. What we've done with just half an A4 piece of paper and curling that round, and we've ended up with hopefully a beautiful lily. And it's still something that just gives me so much wonder. Look at that. It's impossible not to see it as a beautiful flower, and I rather love the kind of ridges and marks from the pencil that it's given. So I'll show you also how to make a stem. This is again how I was shown. So if you had an A4 piece of paper, just folding it in half and then tearing or cutting along that so you have a longer strip. So I will show you this, and at the end I'm going to read you something as well, if I may. So I'm just going to bring this down. So yeah, I'm going to use a pencil again for this, and actually make sure you have, if you have some kind of glue, PVA I really have found to be the best. Pritt stick is a little bit tricky. It won't. Make sure my glue will be ready. So I'm just going to get my glue ready at the side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a corner of this length of paper, and actually if you're to roll it that way, it's quite tricky. So at a slight angle, roll this piece of paper around your pencil on a solid surface, and then you can press on there, and hopefully it's going along the length there. Really making a giant paper straw. There we go. And maybe there's ways to do this with folding, but honestly here I am passing on what I learned, and I think it works well. So then, and actually I think there's a lot more tradition of using glue in Japan and Korea. And I think also because this is something that's predominantly done with children, so it's that being, being realistic, whereas obviously I can completely understand the mental and the kind of challenge of giving yourself, without the option of glue is an amazing thing. But for people just learning, it works well with this. Hopefully you can take your pencil out. Did anybody need me to show that to you again? So I took the corner and I rolled it around the pencil, and then take the pencil out. So you've got a length, hopefully. And with that length, holding that corner, I'm now going to twist it. So I'm twisting it one end, and it will probably or hopefully get a little bit wider on one end and a little bit narrower on the other end. And just go gently, but it will strengthen it as well. Quite interesting, this. Again, how strong paper can be when it's do different things with it. There we go. So a little bit narrow one end, a little bit wide at the other end. And there's the sort of corner of the paper there. There we go. And if you have some glue, pop a little bit of glue. You could use sellotape, but it doesn't look as nice. PVA is the strongest, so I'm just adding, only needs to be tiniest bit, tiniest little blob there, and then pushing it on and just holding it, squeezing it for a little bit. There we go. So if you have some scissors as well, so hopefully that stayed. That's pretty good. Yeah. I would recommend at this point, can you see the bottom? It's a bit obvious how it's been made. So just cut it off like you would with a, cutting flowers to make them a little bit nicer. So just trimming that off, then it's less obvious how you've made it. So just trim off the bottom of that. Yeah. Right, and how to get the flower. There are different ways you could do it, but this is the way I was taught, and actually looks really good because you also get the inside of a flower. And as I said, this has been a good lasting presence for me to leave in locations in a hospital, or if it was in a school, wherever it was, it would be looked after and appreciated. And it's amazing how origami flowers are commented on a lot more than real flowers. So the next step is to take the very bottom of a flower, and we're going to cut off just a little bit. You can always cut off more, but you can't add it. So just a little bit, and it's bigger than it looks, that little hole. So I'm just cutting that off. And then pop your finger into the middle of your flower and push it in, and you can see it's opening up that hole. And then just get that narrower end of your stem and pop it in there. And it might be a little bit of a tight fit, that's fine. You don't want it super loose anyway. So popping that in when you can, and probably twisting the stem so it's going in until you start to see it in the middle. Can you see? and it actually adds another extra lovely layer to it. So one little last bit of glue. When you're happy with the position, just lifting this up a little bit and putting a little circle of glue around there. And the flowers I showed you have lasted 10 years, so they continue to make our room bright, and I just love them. And it's astonishing that those pieces of paper have kept going, oh, it goes a little bit low, all good. But just a little bit is needed. And then push it down onto there, and then squeeze your fingers all the way around the base. And I know I'm just coming up to the end, but I'm going to read you, if I may, a tiny little bit from this, which is obviously more aimed at children, Densho origami. So it's from Japan. I'm just going to read a little tiny bit on the inside. So this is in the introduction. Origami is a beloved way to communicate in Japan, a way for children, parents and grandparents to spend time together over cheerful conversation. Children give it to each other as a mark of friendship. Even adults give origami to supplement a main gift, writing a short message on it. Origami can be a heartwarming present for a sick friend in hospital, encouraging them to get well soon. So interesting. So this is, although these are known as Densho origami, Densho meaning heirloom, a reflection of Japan's cultural traditions. Modern Japan has westernized, but Densho origami has spread all over the world, binding people together. So I hope you've managed to make that. Please do ask any questions. I think I'm at the end of my time, but if you'd like to ask any questions, I'll be more than delighted to answer. I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you for joining me. Any questions? Well done, all of you. Things are only made in your own hands. I hope there has been a sense of discovery, even if you're familiar with these things. Oh, lovely to see your flowers. Could I take a little screenshot of flowers? So nice to see. Oh, we're making a big bunch between us. 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's lovely to see. Thank you for sharing. I hope you enjoyed discovering, rediscovering the marvels of a flower, and we all know that flowers are used to wish each other well.
I have one question.
Please do.
How do you fold the leaves?
The leaves. Actually, somebody taught me that, who was someone actually did a lot of origami. So I would, if I can remember, if I had the other strip of the paper, let me see. So it was pretty much a simple principle as to how you do leaves generally. So you may have come across this. So I just folded it in half and then opened it up. And I took the edge and I folded it to the middle line. So I'm going to do that on both. I'll just see whether I remember. But it's a bit of a making up as you go along anyway. So it looks like this. And then folding it in again. That's right. So taking the outside along that middle line. Like that. And then again. So just folding in and then again. Let me see. I might even do that again another time. Yep, you want it to be quite thick. Maybe. As I said, it's a bit made up. Alright, so just fold it in a few times. And then doing the same thing at the other end. A little bit. As I said, this is very made up. And it's not very neat looking on the inside, but it doesn't matter. If anything, the looseness of it. Maybe folding this into the middle again. As I said, it's just more of a principle, really. That'll be good enough. So something like that. Maybe I went a bit too narrow. Doesn't really matter. And then the important bit was curling over a pencil a bit, so you're a little bit getting it to curl down. So it's more of a principle, just folding in a few times at the top, down to the bottom. It depends how wide you want to make that leaf. And yeah, that's what I've added in there. So you could, it tends to be paler, but that's quite good actually. It does add a lot. Yeah, thanks for asking that. Good question. Did that make sense? But it's quite nice because it's a little bit loose how to do it as well. It's just a principle, really. Yeah. Really nice thing. Make a bunch of flowers for somebody else, or or to bring colour into your room never ceases to make me smile. Any other questions, or you should go and grab yourself a coffee, go to the loo, or things like
Yes,
that?
I have a question.
Please do.
Thank you, Lizzie, to show not only how to fold, including how you love it, huh? With folding with love, huh? That's very important.
Oh,
But and in the hospitals, very frequently, there are some children or adults, some patients that they are connected with the needle in one hand, and they are not able to use both hands. They have only one hand. For example, this flower that is extremely difficult to make with one hand.
yeah,
Which solutions you propose? Which models, which size of the paper, which grammage perhaps, which form of the paper, which models, and which use after folding that can enjoy, that you can obtain the same satisfaction as with the flower, but without make this horrible sequence to curling with one hand, or the petal fold that's horrible to make with one hand. No, that's really including you don't give many importance to the exactitude. That's clear, that's good, but with one hand is an extreme, not exact, and then it can be the result a little not satisfying enough, perhaps. No, which experience you have in this?
Yes, less so. But in some cases, the people I work with, actually, if they move their arm much, it can trigger off the alarm on their drip and things. So it is tricky. Certainly simpler folds would obviously be a good idea. The things I would start with would be the traditional heart, which is lovely, and the cup being good. But I have worked with people who've had sort of strokes or have actually only got one hand that they can use. And actually, I've been amazed, believe it or not, in some groups there where this is ridiculously difficult. They've still wanted to try, actually. And what I've ended up doing is using a little clip to be able to hold things in place. So you're effectively acting as their second hand by clipping things where they need to go. And then they've added the fold with their one hand. I think if someone's only able to use one hand, then you really need to help and interact a lot. But that's a lot of fun, actually, doing stuff together. So I think it needs time together. It's probably not realistic for them to do things while attached. But you can certainly have fun together. And I think clips and helping to add the folds, and you're helping to position, I think it's possible. It may be also something I really enjoy doing is things like, you know, Yoshizawa's gorgeous butterfly. You can encourage them to do a quick kind of scribble of colours onto paper and then fold that into a butterfly. But I agree, folding with one hand is different. You know, it is possible though, and I have seen people do it, but you have to be very determined and using a little clip and helping someone a lot. I hope that helps. Yeah, it's not the easiest with one hand. But you know what? Things are possible if you're determined. If someone wants to do it, they can do things. But this is probably isn't the place to start. But it motivates, and I think actually encouraging people to be ambitious is rather lovely. Any other questions? But do feel free to go and have your breaks.
No, but just a little comment about this. I had the experience, not about one hand especially, but about these skills, or what do you need to fold something and make this experience. And I was doing some little folding for decoration in the group of when my child was 1 or 2 years old. He go to a group with other children, and we did some decorations for the little room they have. They have a big garden and a little room, and the room was a little not so great. It was just for the rainy days. And I said, okay, I'm being here a little bit, let's make something. But I want to do something that the children also could do. But so little children, it's difficult. So I see that you see flower, stem, everything that you put on a stem, it will be a flower. So it was very nice, because I encourage the children to take a color paper, fold anything, put it, I prepare some stems and we fold everything, put it on stems, and they were all beautiful flowers the children did. So that's maybe a solution. Yeah. And even just fold one fold anyway, it will be a flower. And if you put a bunch of them, it will be a fantastical thing.
Oh, that's lovely. The cup's a really good one as well, because it's so simple, the traditional cup. It's just so few folds. I've been making actually flowers for people's rooms because everything has to be laminated, and that's a real challenge with origami. I'll just show you again. It's a traditional flower and it does involve glue, but this is going to be perfect. I thought we could even make some, you know, it's obviously completely flat, but it's only a few folds to make the top of a tulip, and making it flat, and then I can laminate it because that way it will be kept in the rooms and it can be wiped as well. So I just have to work within what's possible, and that's a lovely thing. Right. I think I should let you go, shouldn't I? Enjoy the rest of today. Thank you.